This is Football at 4.
Football at 4 powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. And, of course, it is brought to you by Bet365. Whatever the moment, whatever the sport, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Geoff Mosher from the Inside the Birds podcast is here, which you can get on all podcasting platforms. Just search Inside the Birds. And he joins us now to talk a little football. Moshe, you know, it's funny, today in our big managers meeting, I informed everybody that, hey, we are into July, which means it is training camp month. We are under 25 days now before the Eagles get to training camp. And a couple things that we talked about on Friday's show that I wanted to get your thoughts on as we bring you in on this football for. First off, man, happy Monday. How are you, buddy? You all Paul Georged up?
Oh, I'm great. Yes, what a great day. Paul Georged up, although I'm not, with the Sixers, it's like you're excited, but you also know, like, is this really going to be the team that gets them out of the second round? We'll see. But obviously better than nothing. It's a beautiful week. Mike, something you said also resonates with me because I used to be a baseball writer, so I know what kind of a grind it is to be a baseball writer. So in good-natured ribbing, just like your manager's meeting, every year on January 2nd, like the day after New Year, when everybody's still just hungover, and I would text my baseball beat writer friends and say, hey, spring training starts next month. And you can imagine all the F-bombs and, texts I would get back. But, yeah, you're right. Training camp, it starts this month, and the time will go by very quickly, as it always does.
Well, in one of your latest Inside the Birds podcasts, you guys talked about players who can take another step or the next step. Nolan Smith name came up from Darius Slay on the Green Light podcast last week. We played that audio where he said he thought he will be special this year. And at the end of it, he kind of mentioned, last year he was kind of stuck behind Reddick. And I never thought of Nolan Smith at all. Like, I have, no expectations for him. But hearing Slay kind of call him out and said he thinks that Smith will be special this year with Reddick not kind of blocking him, I'm kind of interested to get your insight. And if you heard anybody, around the organization say, hey, watch out for Nolan Smith, because to me, he was totally off my radar. It was kind of the highlight of, by the way, Slay said a lot of interesting things that I want to get your thoughts on, but I thought the Nolan Smith, saying that he will be special this year, that stood out to me the most.
Well, I think it's hard to just take a first-round pick and completely take him off your radar in year two just because he didn't really perform that much in year one. He's still a first-round pick, and he's still someone who tested off the charts athletically and played at a very high-level program in Georgia, right? So you should have some expectation of him just based on pedigree alone. I believe that Vic Fangio and playing in his actual defense, there will be some advantages there if Nolan Smith can, A, come in with a little bit more weight, be a little bigger, stronger, and ready to compete. But B, if you think about the hook defender or the edge defender in a Vic Fangio defense, not only are you rushing the passer, but there's going to be that small percentage of snaps where you're asked to be the hook defender, which means you drop in and to coverage and you're kind of responsible for the flat area. So while your back end is playing zone, if the receivers are coming back toward the quarterback, if it's a comeback or a scramble drill, that edge guy is there to patrol the flats when the cornerbacks aren't, right? And I think that this is an opportunity for Nolan to really understand his role in that position. And not only can he be a good pass rusher, Mike, because he has great athletic ability, but if he can be a good hook defender as well and use those long arms and occasionally tip a pass or pick off a pass while he's dropping into coverage, he's the type of guy that has the athletic ability to take it back to the house for a touchdown because he's just such an incredible athlete. So year two, in this system that he got rooted in last year, but now is the real thing this year, probably going to have a lot more opportunities because, as you mentioned, Reddick's not here, but also because it's a second year. Remember, Bryce Huff is here, so there's still an impediment there. But I really think it's more that Josh Sweat might have less of a role coming back on the pay cut. And you heard Nick Sirianni say it's time to get more out of our younger players. So clearly Nolan Smith was the guy he was talking about. Jordan Davis, of course, Jalen Carter, but Nolan Smith will get opportunities to learn the defense, master it, and show what he can do.
Yeah, I think a lot of people almost are, I don't want to say counting him out, but are intrigued to see what he can bring in year number 2. And, I don't know what the expectations are. I don't know what the ceiling is for him. But would you be surprised if he had a big impact this year?
No, I mean, not at all. I mean, you have to look at everything from a pass rush standpoint in terms of the 4-man rush, right? Because statistically, Vic Fangio is not going to blitz a whole lot. He's going to blitz 20% of the time. So that means 80% of the time he's rushing the passer with just 4 guys. Now, he could do some creative things. We talked about sim pressures where you're maybe dropping Nolan Smith but rushing Devin White, right? To still be so White becomes the 4th man instead of Nolan Smith or Bryce Huff or whoever. But the point is, you need to find 4 people who can rush the passer the majority of the time. We know Bryce Huff, for what they're paying him, is going to be one. We talked about Jalen Carter. He's got to be an interior burst guy. He's got to be part of the 4-man rush because he has the talent and the capability to do that. But who are the other 2? I just mentioned, Josh Sweat, who is a guy who took a pay cut, and I think he's going to be given opportunities to be part of the 4-man rush. But if he's not any much better than what we saw at the last 6 weeks last year, those opportunities are going to be few and far between, right? Jordan Davis is not a guy that I think is ready now to be. At least he hasn't shown it. Jordan Davis still has to show he can play like 30 to 50 snaps per game without losing his technique and being tired. Okay. So Brandon Graham is a guy who deserves to be in the 4-man rush, but how much is he going to be able to do it at 36 years old? So when I look at the 4-man rush, Nolan Smith has a great opportunity to be right in there with Bryce Huff, with Jalen Carter, as if you want to call it the number 3 guy or one of the 4 that are usually out there when they're going to rush the passer with 4.
Geoff Mosher, Football at 4 here, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. And, of course, one of the other guys, the things that he brought up was Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, and he said the difficulty that they had last year, the lack of communication, playing with all the different safeties, and that's why he's so glad that Chauncey Gardner-Johnson's back, because he kind of admitted that, yeah, we had a lot of communication breakdowns, and I wonder, how much, that factors into a defense kind of falling apart.
Yeah, really nice of Darius to admit that, right? Admit what we all saw in front of our eyes for 17 weeks. So I think, yes, communication was definitely an issue, and you can point to the fact that they had ton of new starters, and they were how many times did we talk about how they were rebuilt up the middle last year, from 2 new linebackers to 2 new safeties, and that takes a lot of camaraderie and cohesion that they had the year before going to the Super Bowl out of the equation. And it didn't help that they also had 2 different defensive personalities calling plays throughout the year. And then it didn't help that the injuries and James Bradbury's regression forced other new guys into spots. So you saw it. It was clear. Not all of it was just an experience. Some of it was, there was a lot of it that was coaching. There were specific formations. We talked about trips formations, bunch formations, where the Eagles clearly were not prepared correctly from a coaching standpoint to cover it. They kept making mistakes and blowing coverages and blowing assignments. And I think it makes sense that when you have a guy like C.J. Gardner-Johnson back to play with Slay, who he's played with Reed Blankenship, who he's played with, to help mentor anybody else who's young, whether it's Quinyon Mitchell or Cooper DeJean, that should help communication. And that should also help performance.
Yeah, and he mentioned Cooper and Quinyon Mitchell and talked about how, now obviously, you're not going to say anything negative about him, but how impressed he was and what he's seen from and the one thing he talked about Cooper that kind of jumped off the page is how special of an athlete, and it sounded like in his voice that this was a guy that he was happy they ended up with, and he can't wait to see how they end up kind of like deploying him in this defense. And you can hear from Slay almost, adding to Vic Fangio. And I think from what I took from it, Moshe, was he understands that Fangio is going to have an accountability that maybe was lacking last year.
Oh, I don't think there's even a question about that. And again, it can't be understated that Vic Fangio doesn't just come in here and lay down the law. I mean, every defensive coordinator needs his or her position coaches, right, to really be your disciples, to carry on the message. The way Jim Johnson had guys like Spags and Harbaugh, when Harbaugh went from special teams to secondary, and Sean McDermott, right? Those guys were going to carry on the message, and he has Clint Hurt. He has Christian Parker. He has the Joe Casper, who was the safeties coach under him last year in Miami. He hired Bobby King, you know? So, I mean, even though Bobby King hasn't coached with him, the linebackers coach, the point is most of these position coaches are already aligned with the coordinator, the defensive head coach, if you will, and it'll be really, really obvious. I don't want to say easy, but it should be a very normal flow of communication, and that includes accountability, discipline, teaching, schematic adjustments, everything from top to bottom that, again, you didn't really have last year.
No question. And he mentioned, I don't know how you take this, so I'll say it the way he did, which was he'll bench you regardless of your salary.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Now,
does that include him?
Never worked for Howie Roseman before, right? So it's easy to say that, and I'm sure a player like Slay can observe that, but let's just see how that goes, because Howie Roseman has a lot of clout in that organization, and if he drafts a player or drafted a player last year, and that player he wants to see get some playing time, and Vic says no, he's not ready, but things aren't going as they seem. I mean, last year we saw it go from Job to Eli Rick to Keely Ringo, the 4th-round pick, finally at the end of the year. I'm absolutely not suggesting that was Howie Roseman putting his foot down, but that was the guy Howie drafted in the 4th round, right?
Yeah.
Who wasn't getting the opportunity early on. So I'm just sort of saying it's easy to say that. And even Howie joked about that in that pre-draft presser where someone said, does Vic have a lot of say on personnel? And Howie made a joke like, I'm sure he wishes he did, or I'm sure he thinks he does. But I'm not going to talk about any personnel decisions being made without at least including the head coach and the GM in that too.
Most, the last thing I want to bring up is something he said about Devin White and the speed and all of, the intangibles there. But in your mind, do the Eagles like what they've seen so far from what they're getting from Devin White and what their expectations of what they want him to be?
Well, I think they're okay with what they've seen so far. It's just been practice. It's nothing you can really measure a guy on, especially in very few team drills, 7-on-7s. I think they'd like to get him into camp a little lighter, maybe than whatever he was at in OTAs, something I just heard. But overall, I mean, they're really not going to be able to get a real great evaluation on him until training camp and until the pads come out. But I do think that I would say this, I would think that Vic Fangio likes the fact that Devin White rushes the passer from an inside linebacker position really well. At least he did for a while in Todd Bowles' defense. And even though the Eagles, and even though Vic are not huge 5, 6, 7-man pressure type of philosophies that Todd Bowles is, I go back to that, what we call sim pressures, where you may drop one of your edges but rush your inside linebacker. That looks like a blitz. It's really just a 4-man rush, but it looks a little bit different than a typical 4-man rush where the 4-down linemen just come right at you, right? And Devin White gives them that kind of an ability. Zach Bond may give them that kind of ability. So this is something I'm looking forward to, Mike. Do we start to see with Vic Fangio here, because we've already seen the Eagles think differently defensively over the last 3 years by playing these 5-2 fronts, right, and rotating coverage on the back end. We have never seen that for 20 years before. So do we now start to see some rushing the passer from an inside linebacker alignment?
I like the thought of it anyway. Looking forward to getting it all underway when training camp begins on July 23rd. Geoff Mosher from the Inside the Birds podcast. And, of course, you can check that out on all podcasting platforms. And, of course, their YouTube channel. Just search Inside the Birds. All right, Moshe. Well, training camp will be here before we know it. I'm going to rush it.
Thanks a lot, Mike. I appreciate it.
All right, brother. Take care. We'll talk to Moshe on Wednesday's edition of Football at 4 here on the Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN, the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app, and streaming live video on the X platform at 973 ESPN. I'm Mike Gill.